What happens when paradise becomes a prison? When the woman you abandoned everything for turns out to be someone completely different. This man threw away a 15-year marriage for what he thought was true love. 3 weeks later, he was staring at evidence that would destroy everything he believed about the woman sleeping next to him. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell because this story will make you question everything you think you know about online romance. Meet Victor Caldwell, a 42-year-old real estate mogul, living the life many would envy. A successful developer who built luxury homes across Arizona. He had everything: money, status, a beautiful wife, and 2 teenage daughters. But despite the seemingly perfect life, something was missing. Victor felt the weight of an unspoken emptiness growing over the years. Victor's marriage to Linda had lasted 15 years. But even the strongest marriages can hide cracks beneath the surface. The years had slowly chipped away at something they both took for granted: passion, connection, and trust. Victor was always chasing the next big deal. And Linda, well, Linda was becoming more and more distant. What once was love now felt like a comfortable routine. But what he didn't know, the next step in his life would be a step into the unknown. An encounter that would unravel everything he thought he knew about love, loyalty, and betrayal. Do you think you know where this story is headed? Stay tuned because what comes next is something no one could predict. Victor's marriage had grown cold over the years, like a fire that once burned bright, but now only flickered faintly in the corners of his mind. Linda, once his partner in everything, had become absorbed in community work, her focus shifting more to causes and the kids. She spent her time volunteering, hosting events. While Victor, in his successful yet isolating world of luxury homes, felt his presence at home fading with each passing day. Victor, though surrounded by wealth, had never felt more invisible. It wasn't the grand houses or the prestige that defined his life. It was the hollow feeling that followed him home every night. The smile he once saw in Linda's eyes when she looked at him gone. In its place, a polite indifference, a silence that spoke volumes. Success meant nothing without connection. And despite everything he had achieved, Victor realized that what truly mattered, the warmth of a shared glance, the spark of affection, had slowly disappeared. As Linda thrived in her new world, Victor was left to wonder what had happened to them and what had happened to him. During those long, lonely nights in the office, while his marriage crumbled quietly in the background, Victor found something he didn't expect. It started innocently enough. Curiosity, a distraction from the mounting pressures of his life. Late one night, scrolling aimlessly on his computer, Victor stumbled across a Filipino dating site. It promised companionship, connection, and something he hadn't felt in years: attention. He created a profile. Half-heartedly at first. He labeled himself as recently divorced, a line he wasn't entirely sure he believed himself. But in that moment, it was a convenient truth. It was the escape he had been craving, even if just for a while. Slowly, messages flooded in. Dozens of women, all eager to connect, share their stories, their lives. But among them, one woman stood out. Her name was Maria. Her profile was different, more thoughtful, more intimate than the others. She didn't just want to chat. She wanted to know him, not the businessman, not the man with the $1 million homes. She wanted to know the real Victor, the one who was lost in the quiet of his own life. Maria's words drew him in. Her honesty, her warmth, they seemed genuine. She asked about his life, his feelings, his dreams. Conversations began to flow like the ones he'd once shared with Linda. Except this time. They were fresh, vibrant, full of possibility. Little did Victor know. While he was searching for love online, someone was searching for him, too. Maria wasn't just looking for a man to fill her time. She had an agenda of her own. And Victor, he was about to walk right into her carefully laid trap. Now, let's talk about Carmen de la Cruz. The woman who caught Victor's eye and captivated his thoughts from the very first message. On paper, she was everything he could have imagined. Beautiful, youthful, and engaging. According to her profile, she was 28, living in Manila, working in hotel management. Never married, no kids, a fresh start waiting to be shared. She seemed perfect, a breath of fresh air in a life suffocated by routine. Her photos were nothing short of stunning, radiating youth and beauty. Carmen spoke perfect English, a polished professional aura that drew Victor in immediately. Her messages were warm yet mysterious. She didn't just ask about his business. She asked about his soul, his passions. Carmen was everything he hadn't known he was looking for. She told Victor that she loved her job, enjoyed working in the hospitality industry, and had spent years building a successful career. She painted a picture of independence. Someone who was passionate about her work. Yet, seeking someone to share her life with, Carmen's charm was undeniable, and Victor found himself pulled in deeper with every conversation. Victor was swept up in her stories, the warmth of her words, and the way she seemed to truly understand his loneliness. But what he didn't know yet was that Carmen wasn't exactly who she claimed to be. The layers of her carefully constructed identity were about to unravel in ways that would make everything Victor believed come crashing down. For 6 months, Victor and Carmen's connection deepened. What started as a casual exchange soon turned into daily video calls. Each one leaving Victor more captivated than the last. Their conversation stretched long into the night, filled with laughter, shared dreams, and promises of a future that seemed just within reach. Carmen never rushed him, never pressured him for anything. But there were moments, small subtle requests where she mentioned things like emergencies that left Victor scrambling. A sick grandmother, a sudden job loss, unexpected expenses that only Victor could help solve. And every time, she was nothing but grateful, never asking directly, but always with just enough urgency in her voice to keep him reaching for his wallet. He didn't think twice. She needed him. It was as simple as that. And so time and again, he sent money, convinced that his actions were just part of a relationship that felt so real, so intimate. It wasn't just about the money. It was about trust, or at least he thought it was. Love letters flowed freely between them. Words of affection, promises of forever. Victor found himself caught up in discussions of their future together, planning a life with Carmen in a way that felt natural, exciting. She was everything he wanted. A fresh start, a new beginning. A woman who understood him in a way Linda no longer did. Everything felt perfect. The life they were building together seemed inevitable. And Victor, for the first time in a long while, felt truly alive. But little did he know, this perfect image was being carefully painted by someone with motives that went far beyond love. As Victor's connection with Carmen grew stronger, his marriage continued to deteriorate. The silent gaps between him and Linda widened into chasms, and the once happy family dynamic began to unravel. Linda, sensing a shift, grew more distant. Caught between the quiet tension at home and the growing storm that was brewing just beyond her reach. It wasn't long before Linda discovered the truth. She found the phone records, Victor's calls, his late-night texts, the same name. Popping up over and over again. Carmen. Linda didn't confront him immediately. No, she let the silence linger for a moment longer, letting the truth settle in like a storm cloud before it burst. When she finally did confront Victor, it was with all the fury of a woman betrayed. Victor, blindsided and guilty, tried to explain himself, but it was too late. The words felt hollow in the wake of everything Linda had discovered. The years of neglect, the lies, the betrayal, they had all come crashing down in an instant. And as if the damage with Linda wasn't enough, Victor's daughters, the ones he'd always been so close to, turned their backs on him. They refused to speak to him, their hearts broken by the man they once admired. Victor had lost more than he ever imagined in a matter of days. The man who had it all, wealth, family, love, was now standing alone in the wreckage of his choices. And the hardest part, he couldn't blame anyone but himself. Victor's world had shattered, and in the rubble of his broken marriage, he made the ultimate decision. One that would forever change the course of his life. He filed for divorce, the papers signed with a finality that echoed in the empty corners of his home. No more pretending, no more false promises. He was done. He emptied their joint savings account. The money that had once been a symbol of their shared future, now a ticket to a fresh start. Or so he thought. Victor packed his bags and booked a one-way flight to the Philippines. Carmen was waiting for him. And this time, he was ready to make her his future. He left behind his family, his business, the life he had worked so hard to build. In his mind, he was flying toward his future, his dreams. Finally within reach. The pain of the past faded with each passing mile, but little did he know, he was walking into the most elaborate deception of his life. Victor thought he was flying toward his future. He had no idea he was walking into the most elaborate deception of his life. The man who thought he could leave everything behind was about to realize that some things cannot be escaped and the past always has a way of catching up. Victor arrived in the Philippines, his heart full of anticipation and excitement. The days leading up to the wedding were a whirlwind. Carmen was everything he had imagined and more. They kept things intimate. A small ceremony at a local church. Just a handful of people, close friends, Carmen's family, and of course, Victor. Everything was perfect, or so it seemed. The ceremony was simple yet beautiful, just as Victor had envisioned. Carmen's family was there. Her parents, aunts, uncles, but their faces, while warm, seemed guarded. They smiled, congratulated him, but there was something strange about the way they avoided personal questions. It was as if they were hiding something. But Victor didn't think much of it. After all, he was in love, and love has a way of clouding the sharpness of doubt. As the days went on, small cracks began to appear in the perfect facade. Victor was given glimpses of Carmen's phone, photos, messages, a glimpse into her past that he hadn't seen before. One evening, while they were sitting together, Carmen carelessly left her phone unattended. Victor took the opportunity to scroll through looking at pictures they had taken together. But there were others, old pictures, ones Carmen quickly hid when she returned. Pictures of her with other men, pictures that didn't fit with the story she had told him. Her reaction was swift and defensive. "Oh, that's from a long time ago," she said, brushing it off as if it were nothing. But Victor couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Why had she hidden it? Why the quick dismissal? And then there was the marriage certificate. It was processed unusually fast, almost too fast for something as important as this. It made Victor uneasy, but he pushed the thought away, convincing himself that everything was just moving quickly because of the excitement. But in the pit of his stomach, something didn't sit right. Victor was caught between the joy of his new life and the growing whispers of doubt creeping in from the shadows. He had left everything behind for this, his family, his business, his past. And now, with every passing day, the reality of his choices seemed to be slipping further out of his grasp. As the days passed, Victor's once blissful honeymoon began to reveal cracks. Subtle at first, but undeniable when added together. Carmen, the woman he had dreamed of, seemed perfect in the beginning. But with each passing day, something felt off. Something that he couldn't quite put his finger on. The red flags were small, almost invisible, but they were there, and they multiplied faster than he could ignore. One of the first things Victor noticed was Carmen's need to control their social interactions. Every time he tried to introduce her to friends or acquaintances, she deflected. "Let's just stay in tonight," she would say. Or, "I'm not feeling well." Her reluctance to engage with others started to feel like more than just introversion. It felt deliberate, like she was keeping him in a bubble away from the world outside. And then there was her supposed job in hotel management. Carmen spoke about it constantly, but Victor never actually saw her leave for work. She'd mention hours, shifts, and responsibilities. But when Victor asked to visit her workplace or meet her coworkers, she always found an excuse. "I'm swamped today, babe. It's too far. Maybe next time." Her stories never added up. Then came the phone calls, mysterious late-night calls she always took in another room. Carmen was always polite, always courteous. But something about those conversations made Victor uneasy. Her tone would change. Quiet, urgent, like she was hiding something. And when she hung up, she would return to the room with a forced smile as if nothing had happened. The final straw came when Victor casually mentioned her neighbors, the ones they'd met shortly after arriving in Manila. They seemed overly familiar with Carmen. But not in the way Victor had expected. They called her by a different name, one he'd never heard before. "Oh, we've known Carmen for years. Always so kind," one of the neighbors had said, smiling, but the name they used, it wasn't Carmen. The pieces were starting to fall into place. And none of them fit. Carmen wasn't the woman he thought she was. She wasn't the perfect, warm-hearted partner he had imagined. She was hiding something. Something far bigger than he was ready to admit. Victor's gut told him something was wrong. The whispers, the oddities, the small lies that piled up. He couldn't ignore them any longer. His mind raced, but he needed proof, something tangible to understand who Carmen really was. And so one night, while Carmen was out, he did what he had never done before. He dug. He found her laptop on the desk just as she had left it. She hadn't logged out of her Facebook account. Victor, heart pounding, opened the browser and clicked on her profile. What he found didn't match the woman who had swept him off his feet. It was someone entirely different. Photos dating back 20 years showed a different Carmen. There she was, not as the 28-year-old woman she had claimed to be, but as someone much older, someone who had lived a life he didn't know. Children, birthdays, family holidays, a world Victor had never seen before. He scrolled further, his eyes widening as he saw pictures of Carmen with men who seemed oddly familiar, but not in the way a new husband should recognize. And then he found the birth Certificate, a document that would shatter everything he thought he knew. The name was the same, but the age was different. 45 years old, not 28. The date of birth, the reality of her age, was staring at him like a slap in the face. All the lies, all the stories she had told him crumbled in an instant. The pieces fell together one by one. Carmen wasn't who she had claimed to be. She wasn't the innocent, sweet woman who had fallen in love with him. She had built a life or perhaps multiple lives on lies. And what was worse, this wasn't her first time doing this. He found evidence of previous marriages to other foreigners. Men who had been swept up in the same web of deception. Victor had become just another victim in her carefully crafted scheme. Victor's world was unraveling. The woman he thought he had married, the woman he had left everything for, was a master manipulator. And he had walked straight into her trap. The storm Victor had been avoiding for months finally came crashing down. Armed with the printed evidence, the photos, the birth certificate, the marriage records, Victor knew the time had come. The truth was undeniable, and he could no longer live in the shadow of his doubts. He needed answers, and he needed them now. Without a word, Victor slams the papers down in front of her. Carmen's eyes flicker, a flash of panic crossing her face as she sees the evidence laid out before her. The photos, the certificate, the records. There was nowhere to hide anymore. Victor's voice cuts through the air, sharp with betrayal. "Who are you, Carmen?" he demands. "The woman I loved never existed. I destroyed my real family for a fantasy, for a lie. Tell me the truth." And then, with a sob that shakes her entire body, Carmen breaks down. "I'm sorry," she whispers, her voice choked with emotion. "I didn't want this, but I didn't know how to stop." Through tears and sobs, Carmen confesses to the deception. She admits that she's not the woman she claimed to be. She's 45, not 28. She's been running this scheme for years, marrying wealthy men, luring them in with the same story, the same lies, and all of it was to support her 4 children from previous relationships. Her family was real, but the story she sold Victor wasn't. Victor's heart shatters with each word. The woman he had given everything for wasn't the person he thought she was. He had fallen in love with a fantasy, a carefully constructed illusion, and now the truth lay before him, ugly, raw, and unforgiving. And in that moment, the weight of his choices hit him like a freight train. The life he had left behind, the family he had abandoned, it all came crashing down. And Carmen, the woman he thought he had married, was nothing more than a mirage, a lie built on years of manipulation. Victor had sacrificed everything for a lie. And now there was no turning back. Victor sat in the dimly lit apartment. The weight of his decisions pressing down on him. The truth had shattered everything. His marriage to Linda, his family, his future. But what was worse, he was stuck in the Philippines, a prisoner of his own making with nothing to show for it. Victor realized he had spent over $180,000 on this relationship. On the wedding. The flights, the lavish dinners, the gifts, the promises he had believed poured into a fantasy that didn't even exist. Every dollar, every sacrifice now seemed like a cruel joke, a sum he would never get back, no matter how hard he tried. To make matters worse, his divorce from Linda had been finalized. He had lost half of everything he'd worked so hard for. His home, his savings, his assets, all divided in a way that felt like a punishment. Linda had moved on. The girls stayed with her. And now Victor had nothing. No family, no home, just the wreckage of choices. That couldn't be undone. Victor's daughters wouldn't return his calls. No matter how many times he tried, how many apologies he sent, they refused to speak to him. The bond they had once shared was shattered. Like glass broken on a cold floor. And the reality, it was all his fault. Here he was, trapped in a foreign land with nothing but a worthless marriage to Carmen. A woman who had used him, manipulated him, and discarded him when she no longer needed him. The dream of a fresh start had become a nightmare. And the man who thought he was starting over was now stuck, far from everything he once had. Victor was a man without a past, without a future. And the hardest truth of all, he had no one to blame but himself. Victor knew he had to escape. The nightmare was far from over, and Carmen's grip on him was tightening by the day. He tried everything. He filed for an annulment, desperate to free himself from the web of lies that had ensnared him. But with each attempt, the walls around him seemed to close in even tighter. Victor had hoped the annulment would be his ticket out, a way to sever the ties with Carmen and start over. But Carmen wasn't going down without a fight. She threatened to claim domestic abuse, accusing Victor of things that never happened, things he couldn't defend himself against in this foreign land. The local authorities, already sympathetic to Carmen's side of the story, quickly sided with her. In a country where women's voices were often given more weight, Victor found himself cornered. He tried to explain, tried to defend himself, but his words fell on deaf ears. His every attempt to escape, to cut the ties, was met with walls built higher than before. And then, as if his personal life wasn't enough of a wreck, his business partners back home froze him out. The news of his failed marriage, his financial ruin, and his reputation now tainted with accusations, spread like wildfire. Investors pulled back. Deals fell through. His empire, once so solid, began to crumble beneath him. Victor's life, once filled with promise and success, had become a labyrinth of failure. His finances, his reputation, his future, all slipping through his fingers. And Carmen, she was the puppet master, pulling every string, tightening the noose around his neck. The walls were closing in. The life he had left behind seemed like a distant dream, and the future was slipping further out of reach. Carmen's control over him was absolute, and Victor couldn't see a way out. Victor had reached his breaking point. The relentless pressure, the never-ending cycle of lies and manipulation. It had worn him down. Carmen, sensing his vulnerability, became more brazen with each passing day. Her demands, once subtle, now grew louder, more insistent. Carmen, in her ever-tightening hold on him, demanded more. "You know what to do," she told him one night over the phone. "I'll keep quiet, but you'll have to pay me more to keep this between us." The audacity, the way she spoke, as if she controlled everything. And in many ways, she did. Victor had given her everything, money, trust, and his dignity. But now, even that wasn't enough. She wanted more, and she would stop at nothing to get it. Victor's mental state was deteriorating. The man who had once stood tall, confident in his success, was now a shell of himself. Drinking heavily to numb the pain, he isolated himself in the apartment, avoiding calls, avoiding anyone who could see how far he had fallen. And then it happened, the final explosive argument. Carmen stormed into the apartment one evening, her face flushed with anger, her voice sharp and demanding. "You think I'm done with you?" she spat, her words venomous. "You think I'll just walk away because you've Paid me off. The argument escalated quickly, both of them throwing accusations, insults, and accusations. Like weapons. Carmen taunting him with every word. Victor unable to hold back. The rage, the betrayal that had been building inside him for months. The fight was a boiling point, a culmination. Of all the pain, the lies, the manipulation that had piled up for far too long. Victor could feel it. The breaking point, the reality of everything he had lost, everything he had given away crashing down on him in one explosive moment. Carmen wasn't just a part of his past anymore. She was the very thing that had destroyed his future. The night that had already spiraled into chaos took a horrifying turn. The heat of their argument, the anger, the years of frustration, all came crashing down in one tragic instant. Carmen, in the midst of her fury, pushed Victor too far. And in that split second, everything changed. One misstep, one fall that would forever alter the course of Victor's life. Carmen's body slammed against the steps with a sickening thud. Victor's eyes widened in horror as he rushed toward her, calling her name, shaking her, but it was too late. Victor was immediately paralyzed with fear. His mind racing with the impossible reality of what had just happened. Her head injury was severe, her breathing shallow, her body limp in his arms. He could hear sirens in the distance as he begged, pleaded for her to wake up. But even as help arrived, the damage had been done. Carmen survived the fall, but the damage was irreversible. The doctors worked tirelessly to save her life. But when the dust settled, the prognosis was clear. Carmen would never be the same. Permanent brain damage. Her once vibrant mind now a shadow of what it had been. Victor's heart sank as he realized the full weight of what had occurred. He hadn't meant for it to happen. His anger, his desperation. It had all led to this. And now his life was irrevocably shattered. But it wasn't just his life that had been destroyed. With Carmen's injuries, the authorities saw this as no accident. Victor was charged with assault. His fate now in the hands of the Filipino justice system. His once promising life, his freedom now hung in the balance. And in the eyes of the law, the victim was Carmen, the woman he had once loved, and the woman he had unintentionally destroyed. Victor's world had crumbled. He was no longer the successful businessman, the man who had it all. He was now facing Filipino prison, a man torn apart by his own mistakes, trapped by the very choices he had made. Victor's nightmare was far from over. The fall, the injury, the consequences. They were just the beginning. His battle now took him into the unforgiving heart of the Filipino justice system where his fate would be decided in the courtroom. A courtroom where he would face not only the law, but the judgment of a society that had already made up its mind. From the moment the trial began, it was clear that the odds were stacked against him. Carmen's family, her parents, her relatives, testified against him, painting a picture of a violent, abusive foreigner who had used and mistreated their beloved daughter. Their words were sharp, filled with anger, and every accusation seemed to land like a hammer against Victor's broken spirit. As the testimonies piled up, so did the media's portrayal of Victor. The headlines screamed of an abusive foreigner, a man who had come to the Philippines, taken advantage of a woman, and nearly killed her in a fit of rage. His every move was scrutinized. His past twisted into a narrative that painted him as the villain in a story that was not his own. The media's portrayal didn't help his case. With every story, with every report, the public opinion solidified around the idea of Victor as the guilty party. The court of public opinion was unforgiving, and it seemed that the Truth would never break through the walls of lies and sensationalism that surrounded him. After weeks of testimony, arguments, and legal maneuvering, the verdict was finally read aloud. Guilty, the judge declared. Victor's heart sank as the words echoed in his mind. The sentence, 8 years in a Filipino prison. 8 years of his life lost to a crime that to him had never been intentional. 8 years. That was the price he had to pay for the choices he made. The woman he had fallen for, the family he had abandoned, the life he had destroyed. All of it had led him here. And now the Philippines would be his prison, the place where his freedom would die. Victor's life as he knew it was over. The trial had been his reckoning. And now he would face the consequences of his actions behind bars. Far from everything he had once held dear. While Victor served his sentence behind bars, the ripples of his decisions spread far beyond the prison walls. The real victims of this story weren't just the ones caught up in the courtroom drama. There were others. People whose lives had been torn apart by the lies and deception that started with Carmen and ended with Victor's downfall. Victor's daughters grew up without their father. The bond they once shared was shattered the moment he walked away from them for a fantasy. They went through the milestones of their teenage years and into adulthood. All while carrying the weight of a father's absence, trying to make sense of the betrayal that had turned their lives upside down. Linda, once the woman Victor had promised a life with, was left to rebuild her life alone. She had to pick up the pieces of their shattered marriage, raise their daughters without the man she had trusted and fight to make a new life for herself. Victor's absence left a void, a hole in their family that Linda couldn't fill, no matter how hard she tried. And then there were Carmen's children, the ones who had been used as pawns in a game they never asked to play. When Carmen fell, they lost the one thing she had been providing, her income. Her deception had kept them fed, housed, and clothed. But now, with Carmen's permanent brain damage and her inability to care for them, they too were left to fend for themselves. Carmen, once the woman who had manipulated everyone around her, was now a victim of her own deception. Permanently altered by the injury she sustained, she required full-time care. The woman who had built a life on lies now found herself dependent on others. Her children bearing the weight of her mistakes. The consequences of Carmen's actions, of Victor's decisions, rippled across multiple families. 2 families once intertwined, now torn apart. Both dealing with ongoing trauma. Both struggling to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. The damage was done and no amount of time could undo the pain. Victor now serves his sentence in an overcrowded Manila prison. A man stripped of everything. His business, his home, his family connections. The man who had once been at the top now lives in the shadows of his own regrets, paying the price for his mistakes every single day. And Carmen, she is a mere shell of the person she once was. Confined to a life that has been reduced to dependency and regret. Her children, once full of promise, now face a future marred by the consequences of their mother's actions. The true cost of the deception, of the lies that tore through 2 families can't be measured in money or prison time. It's seen in the empty spaces, the missed moments, and the broken hearts that no one can repair. Was Victor a victim of elaborate fraud, or did his own selfish choices lead to this tragedy? Was Carmen a desperate mother trying to survive or a calculated predator? The line between victim and perpetrator is often blurred. And in this story, it's hard to know who's the true villain. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think? Who's to blame in this tangled web of deceit? This story shows how online romance can destroy not just one life, but multiple families. The person on the other side of that screen might not be who they claim to be. The lies we tell ourselves and the ones we believe can have consequences we never expect. So next time you meet someone online, remember. Not everything is as it seems. Your heart, your safety, and your future could be at risk. If this story shocked you, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more true crime cases that will make you think twice about modern romance. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest investigations. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Stories that will challenge everything you thought you knew. And remember, in the age of the internet, the most dangerous lies aren't the ones told by strangers. They are the ones we tell ourselves. Stay vigilant. Stay aware, and always trust your instincts because the truth is often more complicated than we want to believe. Stay safe out there. You never know who's behind the